Again, I want to remind everybody, first of all, it's hard for me to check emails in the morning because I have to leave so early. I try to do it during the break. I try to respond to most people's emails. If you're having any serious issues uploading your paper, you can have some brief time after this class, not too much time, to show you how to do it. The better way is just to email me the paper and I can submit it into my safe assignment. But it has to be uploaded. Okay, make sure everybody gets the attendance sheet, please. It has to be uploaded. If you want to turn in a paper copy just to make sure that you showed me that you finished it that day, that's fine. Some of you showed it to me. That's okay. Just email it to me tonight. Again, you can also do the cut and paste. I encourage you to try to do this before you email me the paper. Okay, but again, if you want to make sure that I have your name and everything, that you turn in a paper copy on time, again, please show me that after class. Anyway, on top of that as well, and I tried not to burden you with with reading, but also it tells me because nobody emailed me when it became a bit of a test that this article wasn't up there. Luckily for you, up on Blackboard, I mean. Luckily for you, this article is somewhat longer than it needs to be, and frankly is just a rehashing of the first Kaiser Family Foundation report on the media that then was updated. The study was done in 2009. The results were published in 2010. So for next time, for Wednesday, now that you don't have your test due, and that means you should have plenty of time, and we're shifting over to our media section, which we're going to talk about media primarily, but we're going to talk about the government's role in regulating media. We're going to talk about the role of family and particularly parents in impacting children's use of the media. We're going to look at media and youth. We're going to look at media and race. So we're going to cover a lot of topics. And it's important because we're using articles that are either online or on Blackboard as material that you come to every single class. And if you do miss, for a legitimate reason or not, regardless, I mean, you're going to miss the points if it's a illegitimate reason. But to make sure that you get the notes from somebody else, okay? So it's going to be important. And also, all the slideshows, stuff that I'm showing you, we're going to talk about media theories, will all be online on Blackboard. The media slideshows are already up there now. But again, one of the things, and this is, I mentioned this before, but this is an important thing for this one, the way you want to take notes here is either print the slideshows out for next time, bring them in, and write on the slides themselves, or reference which slide. If it's a slide that has a specific title on it, and I use a specific example, and you want to remember that, make sure to write that down. Write down any extenuating information that you think will help you remember these things. Now, when it comes to reading these articles, focus on the main ideas that they're trying to discuss, and the main theories. What type of data are they using, and what are their main conclusions? You'll see it with this article. So for Wednesday, make sure to look over this. This is basically a chart, and we'll talk about this today. But I want you to go through that and look into it. I think many of you will find it very interesting. It talks about who owns the media and what conglomerates own the media and what elements of the media do they own. We're actually going to show, we'll talk about Disney a little bit today as we get on to the slideshow itself. And then the Kaiser Family Foundation, this is about 4 pages long or so. It's an online resource. And again, it's a report on young people's media use, and it's an update of the information that's used in this one from 2004. And then this one is already up on Blackboard, and this is about media, media and children's fear, aggression, and altruism. What are the more large-scaled and broad effects of the media? We have a real breakdown into 2 major camps that media is inherently bad for young people because of its focus on violence and sex and mature content, or at the very minimum manipulating kids into wanting toys that they don't need and food that they shouldn't eat. And then on the other side, that the media potentially might have pro-social effects, including things like enhancing the impact of living in a diverse society, or developing certain emotional intelligence, or even learning things like on Sesame Street. So make sure to read that. Again, keep in mind those things I talked about while you're reading the article. This one is quite easy to understand. A lot of scientific articles, particularly in sociology, are just the most ridiculous things you'll ever read in your life. I would say with most scientific journals, I'm not sure. And again, they're not necessarily meant for the general public, but particularly if you're a sociologist talking about media, you should make it understandable to a much larger audience. And this is why sociologists, most of them, pennies in their pocket because they don't write things like other people do. You know, you take someone like, and sociologists don't like this guy, Malcolm Gladwell writes a book and makes $20 million and spreads ideas and takes things from social science and puts them out in the public. With this one, this is actually a journal article or journal called The Future of Children. And it is much more geared towards maybe more of a layman audience. But again, you'll see it as it's much easier to understand than most other journal articles. All right, any questions on that? Yes?
That little document you just showed is on Blackboard.
What?
That document you just showed is on Blackboard.
The syllabus?
No, the document with the links on it.
Yeah, that's the syllabus.
Sorry.
No, it's on there. And the links for those two things are on here too. Now the article I just mentioned in Future Children is in Blackboard. And it'll say media articles due by 2/29. Okay? All right. All right. So let's start with our discussion of the media. Again, here is the links for the ownership chart and then for the Kaiser Family Foundation. And again, obviously, one of the big controversies about media is how much media do people use and what is its effect. We are going to start out talking about what dynamics of various aspects of what survey data have said people use the media for, how much media do people use, and then we'll hopefully get through this. I'll show you some of the charts for the big 6 media companies, and then we'll get into conflict theorist view, functionalist theorist view, and symbolic interactionist view, and hopefully if we have time as well to look at the theories underneath that, pluralist media theory and postmodern media theory. If you don't understand what I'm saying, you will soon. So just keep all these things in mind. Now to start out with, and obviously again, you always have to take survey data with the sense that it has a margin of error because it's a sample, but some of this considers to be pretty accurate. You can find a lot of different surveys that suggest right around these time rates. And at this one I used a Nielsen study from 2008 on television behavior, as well as the General Social Survey in 2006. Television use on average in the United States is 4.5 hours a day. The TV is on for over 8 hours a day in people's homes, which means people do more than just watch television. Television becomes a way. Some people are insomniacs and they leave it on while they sleep. Some people have to have it on while they're cooking, or while they're doing homework, or while they're babysitting, or whatever it is. The TV is just on a lot of the time. It's almost like a non-responsive friend. It's just part of the family. It's just there. Not only that, people have a lot of televisions in general. The average American has 2.7 televisions, while the average household only has 2.5 people in it. And obviously, you can't have 2.5. I mean, you can't have 2.5 people. I guess go ask Charlie Sheen. But anyway, you can't have really you can't have 2.7 TVs. But in general, if someone has 2 people in the household, you can bet they most likely have 2 televisions. So, and if they have 3 or 4 people, they have that many televisions as well. Most individuals, if you live in a household with multiple people in it, even if there's one main television in the living room, there's multiple televisions throughout the house. And we couldn't make Samsung and Vizio and a lot of these other companies happier, because every 5 minutes there's some kind of a new television. And I've got one thing to say, and I think most people in America would probably back me up on this. First of all, well, 2 things. First of all, I don't want to see everything in 3D. I'm no interest in that. I think HD television is quite ugly enough on a lot of levels. There's a lot of... Look, HD TV takes somebody who looks halfway decent and turns them into some kind of a gargoyle. Okay, television exposes bad things about your face. Wrinkles, indentations, any kind of imperfections. The television screen and the lights they use are going to magnify it. Secondarily, even if I did want to see something like a football game or a movie with very attractive people and a beautiful setting, not wearing glasses for 3 hours watching television, or 4.5 hours a day. And those of you who already wear glasses, how's that feel to go into a 3D movie and have to put on another set of glasses? And those glasses are real comfortable, right? Makes my nose itch, the bridge of my nose itch. And I love it. They say recycle your glasses. I don't think so. And these glasses you just gave me, how do I know that those weren't in some kind of bin somewhere and you just put plastic over the top? That's what it sounds like to me. Isn't that what's going on? So anyway, but it has allowed people to, television companies to say, here's the next thing. I mean, what's next? A holographic projection in your house. I would say to television companies, wake me up when you can partially transport something where if I can order from Amazon, it's in my house 5 seconds later. Okay, wake me up when that happens. Otherwise, stop wasting my time with this stuff. Okay, because I've got a flat panel screen TV and it's HD. It's not even 1080 and it's fine. I don't need to see any more of Dan Deerdorf's ugly face. I just don't. Okay, I almost like sometimes watch regular television on it just to get away from that kind of stuff. So there's a reason why they put makeup this thick on your face. Okay, who knows? Maybe that's has to do with some of the ratings of shows that have gone down. People see this stuff on HD and go, "Wow, I never knew Ellen looked like that." Anyway, or Oprah, her rating's been hurting. So anyway, so and then moving on. So and then 70% of TV owners have cable, and that's from the Nielsen study, and it's probably even higher now. That was in 2008. It's higher now probably because of the analog to digital transition. Now, and you can't, if you live in New York City, for example, you cannot just buy a television and get reception. You have to go get one of these box converters. And it was essential to me, and in the minds of many, this is a conflict theorist perspective, but I certainly agree with this. At the very minimum, it was a trick to sell these stupid converters. And at worst, it was almost forcing people who can't afford it to buy cable, even just to watch the local news on Channel 5 or something, which I'm not sure you really want to watch anyway. What are you missing? I saw something, me and my friend were watching something and we were DVRing it and stopped it right before the beginning of the next program, and it was a little cut into from the news program. It said this, mouth-destroying toothbrushes next at 11. And I thought, man, this is what news is. It's $15 trillion national debt. The Afghan war looks like it's about ready to explode. It looks like the Israelis and the Iranians are about ready to kill each other. Gasoline's at $4.50 a gallon. Milk's not much cheaper. This is what you're talking about? Mouth-destroying toothbrushes? Yeah, that's a real serious problem, isn't it? It's like remember the scare. You guys probably don't remember this. About 4 or 5 years ago, some stories got around about a flesh-eating bacteria. And every other story in these local newspapers was about flesh, or MRSA, which MRSA is a serious issue to some extent, but it's been overblown. Just like strangers kidnapping children. That's always a good story that'll get a lot of ratings, but you have to ask yourself, as a news consumer, do you really want to watch a program that is designed by people who are more interested? They're not interested in saving the kidnapped child. They actually, it's a bigger story if the child gets raped or murdered. That's a much more interesting story. And saving cats and trees is just not, interesting anymore. And if a building catches on fire, hopefully it explodes, because that'll look really good on camera. Television has disrupted a lot of what the news media does because of, especially local news. They try to make it. It has to be like an episode, or like one of the sequels to Die Hard or something, where people are jumping off of roofs and shooting people, and in the end, that doesn't teach you anything about local schools. It doesn't teach you anything about if there's corrupt politicians, or is there police brutality, or is crime going up, or anything like that. So anyway, but still, 70% of people have cable. Radio use. Probably most of you listen to the radio in your car. I would assume a lot of you, though, circumvent this by plugging in your iPod or an MP3 player or something like that. Does anybody here have satellite radio? So, 1, 2 people. That's why Sirius and XM are about out of business. Did you get it free with your car, though? Yeah. See. Did anybody actually pay for it?
I paid for the next month.
That's about it. What's it cost, roughly? Like $20?
I have
No.
no idea. So.
What, do you listen to it, though?
Yeah, and also I plug in my iPod, so mostly my iPod though.
But you can do that you don't really need that, though, right? So, anyway. But what did you just, because it's commercial free, is that why you enjoy it? Or?
Yeah.
All right. Who here, though, when you listen to the radio, who here listens to commercial radio? At least once during the week. Is it, who it's in the car, mostly? Do anybody listen to it outside the car? When do you do? When do you do it? Shower? Okay.
Just in the house.
Well, why don't you you never tried one to get satellite radio, get the commercial, I guess what's the point of paying for it, right? To some extent. One of the interesting things about the internet is that people felt the internet would destroy radio. But what I think, commercial radio, one of the interesting things, I think actually it's helped to revive it and to give it a much larger audience base. Because look, if I don't know why you would actually be a fan of this team, but if I was a Seattle Mariners fan, first of all, I'd probably be looking over a bridge like this. It's not so bad, anyway. Or going, why am I worried about the Mariners? Anyway, Seattle's a bad sports town. I mean, they're so bad they lost their NBA team. That's how terrible they are. Anyway, and it rains constantly, so it's sort of there's a lot of people on antidepressants. Anyway, but if you wanted to listen to the Seattle Mariners game on the radio, and you didn't want to pay for this MLB package, you could actually listen to it live on the radio. I mean, I could turn on 1050 ESPN right now, and we could listen to it. We're not going to. But anyway. Again, and so that it's giving people a lot of access. If you want to listen to talk radio from another small town or news, or you want to keep up on your hometown or something like that, you can do that kind of stuff. So, but in general, who here when you listen to radio, you listen to news? So, like 2 people. How about traffic and weather? I guess that's sort of in general. How about sports? Sports talk radio. So a few people. Out here it's mostly music. It's almost all there. You can't see. And the music industry depends upon this. There's no doubt about it. Okay. Now, some things are cut off. Like Disney runs. Disney has a radio station called Radio Disney, where they present a lot of like new, younger stars, and that is only available. I think you can get it online, but you can get it definitely on satellite. So, but again, those things aren't commercial radio. So radio is adapted actually a little bit better to the internet age. You'd think that it would be dead, but I think it would, even with MP3s and CD players in cars and all that other stuff. One thing that is probably not many people... Does anybody listen to the radio when they walk around with your headphones on? Does the iPhone, does it have radio dial?
It can,
Yeah.
You get an app or something? Does anybody have that app? Is it pretty good?
It's not bad. The commercials are really annoying.
Are they really loud or something?
No, it's just like frequent. It's like every 3 songs you should stuck around.
That's great. So there's that's crazy though. So yeah, leave it to Apple. So I mean, it'd be worse if Google or if YouTube ran a radio station or something like that. So, but even with the ability to plug an MP3 player in and all this stuff, people still listen to the radio. I think it gives people a sense of connection. Certainly during times of like natural disasters, the radio is absolutely vital. If electricity goes out, you can still get a battery and operate a radio, or there's these radios you wind up.
Crank radios.
Huh?
Is it the crank radios?
Right. They're like, I think they're called safety radios or emergency radios or something like that. So. And they've actually done studies that during natural disasters, people who feel isolated in their home and electricity's out, the radio becomes like this sense of connection to other people. So it's important. Anyway, but studies show, like it's shown here, 90% of Americans listen to the radio sometime during the week. Music, weather, traffic, internet radio too. Newspapers, on the other hand, this is a dying form of media. Only about 50%, and for your age group, it's probably about 10 or 15%. What was funny was, sort of, I heard students make jokes like, we pay like all this tuition and all they give us is a free New York Times. And nobody even took it. Most people didn't. I'll tell you what, like when Obama won, I took one. I've got 2 of those. When the night before the election, I took one. And then the Giant Super Bowl, I took that one. And I got that one. I'm probably going to laminate that or put it in a frame or something. So anyway, but if Obama wins re-election, I'm going to keep that one too. Even if somebody like Mitt Romney wins the presidency, President Mitt just sounds funny to me. So I wonder what his real name is. Because again, the mitt is like something you put on your hand to keep it warm. Anyway, but most people don't read this. It's an old form, and one of the issues is that you can get a lot of this content free online. So why would you have this delivered? And you actually see the New York Times on television saying stuff like this. Get the traditional paper. And they have people going, I love to lay the New York Times out in the middle of my, my living room, lay on the floor. And it's like, I could do that with a Kindle. Can you get the New York Times on a Kindle? The one thing is that if I drop this into the Long Island Sound or into the sink or it gets wet, it's not a big deal. If you get a Kindle wet, that's $80-some or whatever it is out the door. Although I've heard iPads and Kindles are pretty good, it's not too bad if you get them wet. The ports are the problem or something like that. Believe it or not, Samsung's got a phone where you can basically dunk it in water and beat it up and all kinds of stuff like that. It's for construction workers and things like that. So you can't have some light, junky iPad when a construction site gets hit by a sledgehammer and shatters into a million, especially at $500. It'd be different if it's $200 or whatever it is. So, anyway, but again, only about 50%. And although magazines are quite popular still, does anybody here read a magazine? What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a media survey online. I'll have you guys answer like 10 questions, and it'll be anonymous, and it'll only be for the class. And we'll see what people think about certain media aspects. We may run it a few times. A first set of questions just on media usage, and then another one on maybe material or things like that. So, and then we'll count as your participation, and it'll be quite easy. People is the most read magazine in the nation, and it deals with mostly celebrity stuff. But there are magazines for everything you can name: cars and bodybuilding and fashion. Teen magazines are real big still. Even stuff like, even though these, even those things related to magazines like comic books are still quite popular. Even though it's not quite the same, it's really kind of extended cartoons to some extent, but they're sort of magazine fold-out form like that. But in general, even with magazines and people and stuff, people subscribe online to these things. But on some levels, to a lot of people, it's not quite the same. And still people, I think the New York Times is somewhat right. Some people do like to spread the newspaper around or the magazine, or be able to just have something where it doesn't need a battery to work. So anyway. And again, one of the things, and one of my other students, I had him look up this up. For example, even though this is sort of a newspaper, although it acts more like a magazine because it's more of a, maybe I think it's every day. The National Enquirer, even though a lot of newspapers have been going out of business, the National Enquirer has been around for over 80 years, and it's not going anywhere. And this is what I love. You couldn't find somebody who admits to reading the National Enquirer if you pointed a gun in their face and told them to tell the truth, you were going to shoot them. Right? Virtually nobody will admit to, they might admit to reading the headlines because it's at the supermarket, but there's barely anybody who admit to having a subscription or to actually purchasing one of these things. Or just like very few people are going to admit they go to a psychic. Right? So it's almost similar to that, but the New York Times actually, or the National Enquirer was up for a Pulitzer at one point, I believe for the story on John Edwards. And then they write stuff like alien baby born to a man in Kansas City or something like that. Or that Hitler's still alive and is advising Iran. I mean, that's the kind of crap that gets into the National Enquirer. And actually the success of TV shows and websites like TMZ have actually helped the National Enquirer. Because they look a lot more credible than TMZ. TMZ is stalkers. All they do is stalk celebrities with cameras. And some of the celebrities don't mind, but, they're people too, and they, do stupid things and make mistakes, and the cameras they're always there when Kanye West punches people. So, and I think they got a thing for him, against him. So anyway, but he does enough work on his own to help his negative attitude. Internet use depends on the age of respondent, but it is anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a day, with most falling in between. Younger and more educated people use the internet more. Your age group, or below 25 at least, because I know not everybody's here is below 25. But your age group uses it in a much larger amount, of 3 to 4 hours, sometimes 5 to 6 hours. And if you included things like this screen time, where maybe you're not online but you're doing work, you sit in front of visual screens probably more than like 8 to 9 hours, perhaps 12 hours a day. And my gosh, if those things give you brain cancer, we're all going to die. I don't think so, because I remember my mom used to tell me, don't sit so close to the TV because they go blind. I'm not blind. I got pretty good vision, so I don't know what to believe. I would tell you that old computer screens, when I was first going to college in 1993, first of all, it was primitive. There was no Facebook or any of this stuff. On top of that, the screens, when you watched them, they were green in color, and they would make these red lines across your eyes. Your eyes would be really messed up afterwards. So I think they've improved it greatly. Some of and they don't use those cathode ray tubes anymore, which generate a lot of heat. And if you've ever looked at an LED light for a long time, or a liquid crystal light, it's not really that bad as much as something like, because what a cathode ray tube is basically a light bulb going right to your eyeballs. So if you ever stared at a light long enough, I mean, even when I get into this thing, it blinds me. It's just a projector light here, which is probably like a 100 watt bulb. Anyway, now as far as the survey was this is a research institute from the Pew Center. And they're looking at the internet in American life and how it's impacting people's lives. This is a 2009 survey where they looked at how do people who go primarily online to either trade stocks or check stock quotes or financial news or any kind of economic purpose, how do they use, and these are usually older internet users, how do they use the internet? So 3/4 of online economic users, those Americans who use the internet to keep up with the news about the economic recession or their own personal finances, go online and relax and take their minds off the recession, according to an April 2009 survey. They also go online to listen to music and watch online videos, and are among the most common of the activities that they engaged in. Roughly half of all online economic users have done each of these activities to relax, meaning listening to music and watching online videos. And if you actually look at the survey data on internet usage, the only thing really different here, although it's mentioned here, are social networking sites. Older people who go on the internet don't tend to go on these sites. I would venture to say that most people above the age of 50 don't have a social network. And if they do, it's to keep track of their grandkids or something like that. And if your parents have a MySpace or a Facebook page, and poor MySpace, I would say to Mark Zuckerberg, you think you're not going to be MySpace at some point? You think someone's not going to come along and slash your throat the way you did it to your friends at Harvard? You realize that his friends paid him to make this site for Harvard, and then he stole it and then made it national, and then tried to deny that he had done that, and didn't one of his friends sue him for $250 million or something ridiculous? I think he got like 60 or 70 or 80, something like that. And I would say to Mark Zuckerberg, hey, business is brutal. I hope you better put some of that money away, friend, because you are not Steve Jobs. You know, and I would say to him as well, Apple stock was once at $3.50. It's at $500 now. They used to only have about 6% of the market when it came to PCs. They're probably up to 20% now, and they're 56% of the smartphone industry. But I would say to them, Apple, you better watch your back, because here comes Samsung. Anywhere, look, it's just like a gold rush. When companies see that you can sell something for $500 with very minimal inputs, which is what an iPhone is, probably costs $50 all told, labor and parts all together to put it together, you are going to create a mad rush for people to come into that industry. And I'm surprised that Research in Motion let the industry get away. Remember, they had the Crackberry or BlackBerry and all this other stuff. That was really the first thing where you could check email and the internet and stuff like that. And you know, they made a mistake, and they underestimated Apple's prowess. And Apple was smart, and they took the iPod and they said, hey, let's just make this into a phone, essentially, and have it do all this other stuff. Because the iPods, they download stuff off the internet, correct? So it doesn't take much of a leap there. What's the interesting thing now is surveys are starting to show that people use their phones more to do other things than to actually talk on them. That most people don't talk on their phones. The concept of a conversation on a telephone is going away completely. People don't talk on the phones anymore. So AT&T, no wonder they're getting into cable and internet stuff. Like the key is, if you're AT&T or Verizon, you have to have Apple on board with you, or you're going to die. I mean, you're going to die quick or slow death. It just depends, you know. So anyway, but again, you know, most people don't go on these social networking sites who are somewhat older, although that is changing to some extent. But back to how economic users use the internet, approximately 1/3 of online economic users have played online games or chatted with friends. And you can bet these online games are probably multi-user games. Okay, this is one of these arguments: is the internet and portable devices and all this stuff online, is this damaging the social fabric and social interaction, or is it assisting it? And it might be an element of both. That for some people it is causing antisocial behavior. almost a form of like internet-induced Asperger's syndrome, where you just don't hang around with anybody anymore. And after a while, if you don't engage in actual conversations with people, it's much harder for you to focus on their eyes when they talk and not to fidget. And I can tell you right now, I mean, one of the quickest way to make somebody antisocial is to isolate them from other people, to where they don't get used to being around people anymore. If you've ever seen kids who are neglected, or some kids get locked in the basement and stuff, I mean, these are severely emotionally damaged children. And the argument is that the internet does something similar. It kind of boxes you in, and you pretend to be somebody else, and you can hide from people, and a lot of people can make their living on the internet. I mean, right now, look, the world has gotten, in the minds of some people, critics would say, so far out of whack. You can make a decent salary going to video game contests. Worst of all, and I know this isn't related to it actually is related to the media, you can make money being a professional eater. If you don't mind eating calf brains and stuff like that. Okay? I think one of them was a seaweed eating contest, which you can check me out of that. Ice cream, cookies, pizza, call me, even those hot dogs and Nathan's. The one guy, and the media loves this stuff because it's sick and it's extreme. And the hot dog eating contest actually goes back a long, long time at Coney Island. But if you actually look at the guy who wins it normally, and the last guy who's won is Joe Chestnut. He beat Kobayashi, who for some reason got arrested a couple years ago when he showed up because he wasn't invited or something. And they give him a mustard yellow belt. But anyway, the guy ate 17,000 calories in like, I think it's 15 minutes. So you can see he's like choking this stuff down. And the media loves this stuff. It's disgusting to watch. Like, at first it's okay, but then they start dipping this stuff in water, and it's like, my gosh. It's like, this isn't what human beings should be doing. And you shouldn't pay people to do this stuff. Like, you win like $50,000, and they told you they get this mustard yellow belt. And I think they get like a year's supply of hot dogs, which is like, I don't really think most people would want to eat hot dogs after that. So, but they do other things like cabbage eating contests. It's like, and if you ever, having a cabbage eating contest is probably not a good idea. It's like eating, probably shouldn't have a chili eating contest. You can see where that's going to lead. So, anyway. Well, so 1/3 of them chatted with friends, while another 22% of these economic users have taken their minds off the economic or financial circumstances by creating or posting content online. So they're actively creating content. Young Americans, on the other hand, in particular, go online in great numbers to relax by watching videos, listening to music, playing games, or chatting with friends. This is certainly the case as Facebook and other things have evolved into video chats and stuff like that. Quickly, I want to go over this. This is the data from the Kaiser Family Foundation from 2004. I want to highlight some statistics and move to the more updated information. You can see how prevalent television is here. 8 to 18-year-olds and 33% of children from newborn basically to age 6 had a TV in their room. In 2003, 23% of children in the birth to 6-year age range had a video player in their room. And we talked about this, remember, the absent parent or the serial father or the absent father or whatever it is, that parents use media devices as proxies for babysitters and for spending time with their children, or even when they're spending time with their children, it's here, son, let's watch a baseball game and not talk for 3 hours. Because I don't know how to express myself. Anyway. 10% had a video game player. This should tell you how quickly things get outdated. 5% had a personal computer. These are 6-year-olds. 6-year-olds. Not surprisingly, the proportion climbs as children get older. For example, in excess of 80% of 8 to 18-year-olds report having their own radio and their own, I love this, CD or tape player. One of the mistakes that I made is that it took me a long time to want to buy a CD player. And what I didn't realize is that you cannot take, I mean, I guess you could. You can't take cassette tapes and put them on your computer, but you can take CDs and do this. So if all you have is something on tape, the one good thing is that if you skipped over the CD thing, all you have to do is buy it on Amazon. And albums are now $8, $9. Some, if they're older, they're like $6. And classical music is about as cheap as it gets. You get all Mozart symphonies for like $5. Anyway, but 92% claim to have some kind of music medium in general. 31% have a computer of their own. This is 8 to 18-year-olds. half have a video player, 49% a video game console in their room. And again, this is from 2003 and 2004. As new electronic media have become more portable and more affordable, young people tend to number among the earlier adopters. In 2004, 61% of 8 to 18-year-olds claimed to own a portable CD or tape player. And again, if you ever looked at a portable CD player, it is the most unwieldy, ridiculous device ever invented for portable music. CDs skip. I don't care how much of a load. Some of them say, well, it has a load of 40 seconds, so nonsense. You can't jog with one. You can't walk down the street. They're all heavy. I had one. I walked down the street with it. It fell off my belt and it smashed into little pieces. And I paid like $80 or $90 for it. I went and got an MP3 player this big. It only had like 4 Gs in it, or something like 4 gigs, but it was like $30 or something. I think it was even less than that. And it came with its own little software and everything, and it's got 700 some songs on it, and it weighs 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces. And I put it in my pocket when I go for a walk. Whereas these, man, I'm glad we've gone beyond this. CD players were a mess. I don't even know. I don't even know how stores even sell these things. It's funny to me. They still sell record players at stores, which actually makes sense because now people like do little DJs and mixing and stuff. And you can still get VCRs at stores and other things like that. So it's weird the transition that we're living in is that, like for example, I saw somebody write a physical check the other day, and I thought, man. And I was at Best Buy, and I thought, I bet Best Buy doesn't want to have to go through this anymore. But they have to, because I know some of you may do this, but who do you think mostly writes checks in this world anymore? Yeah, and more specifically, older women. Older men, and I want to say Tim Allen made a joke about this. He said, this is like an IOU from your mother. Like, I really have the money, I swear, it's in the bank. Where most men would rather have cash, and even the credit cards. Older men, the credit card is too girly. Like for example, though, like a lot of credit cards give you 1% back, so that's like a rebate on your sales tax. And if you pay it that day, I would caution you with all the theft going on. Be careful with the debit card. It's connected right into your savings account. They'll drain it if they get it. Whereas a credit card, if it's Capital One, you can fight them in court for years. They're actually pretty good. I had somebody try to charge $400 worth of crap off of Apple, of all things. I didn't even have an iTunes account, and they took it off like that. So, but had that been my savings account or something, who knows what would have happened. Anyway, so the portable things have become much more important here. If you look at this, this is again from 2004. 61% of 8 to 18-year-olds claimed owning a portable CD player, tape player. 55% handheld video game, which is quite high actually. 18% that's a personal data and music device. 39% their own cell phone, which is much higher now, and 13% some kind of handheld internet device. Internet connectivity via cell phone was relatively rare at the time. This also speaks to the rapid diffusion of such media among youth, as further attested to by estimates from 2005 that 45% of teens own their own cell phones, up from 39% just 1 year earlier. As far as multimedia use and concurrent media use, meaning if you're playing a video game, are you listening to music, or are you when you're on the computer working on something, is the television on at the same time? That type of stuff. But this counts sort of as a double effect, or a much more intense effect, that you're being bombarded by 2 or more things at once. And some people have 2 or 3 things. They're playing video games or listening to music, and the TV's on. Maybe they're watching a sports contest or whatever the hell it is. So anyway, so in the article that I was going to assign you, but I'll make it more optional, author Ulla Fair provides insights not only about the level of concurrent media use, but also about who is and is not media multitasking, and which media are more likely to be used concurrently with other media. Footnotes that a large majority of young people, 81%, report sharing at least some of their media time among 2 or more media concurrently. Wide variations, however, exist in how much young people media multitask. When asked how often they use other media at the same time they watch TV, 29% of 7th to 12th graders say most of the time, and another 30% reply some of the time, which is well over 50%, 59%. Ask that question in relation to listening to music. 33% say most of the time, 30% say some of the time. In relation to using a computer, 33% replied most of the time and 29% some of the time. So that's up near 60%. 2/3 of all young people are multitasking. And if you see, at least some of the time, 81% say that they're using this as well. They've actually done studies, and I'll show you this because we're going to watch a documentary from Frontline called Digital Nation. And they actually did a study at MIT that people are some of the supposedly the brightest minds in our country suggest that they think they can multitask and do things very well. And what the study showed is that not only did they not do these things well when they were multitasking, but the more things they tried to do consecutively, not only the worse was their production, but also the higher their stress level was. And they've also shown that even though there is this idea of state-dependent learning, meaning that you listen to music while you're writing or something like that, to assist you, that it's shown that this is also being distracting. That reading while you're listening to music, particularly with lyrics in it, it distracts your mind. They have done studies that have shown that listening to classical music while you're reading is somewhat helpful to some people. But again, that depends on your temperament and your personality. If you can't stand classical music, it's going to distract you when it's on. You know? And I think also this depends on the situation. Sometimes I can't read unless it's completely silent. Especially if it's a book that I really need to focus on. Other times, if it's I don't think that it's that big of a deal if you're listening to classical music while reading Danielle Steele or something like that. And for those of you who don't know, Danielle Steele's written the same book about 40 times. It's like Stephen King, although I would give him a little more creativity. It reminds me of AC/DC. They write it's the same song 25 times. So anyway. But again, if you're reading a novel, I don't think it's as big of a deal. If you're reading a biology textbook and you're going to have a test next week, it might not be such a good idea. Okay. Anyway, so you get an idea here that people are using a lot of media in general, as well as young people. I know this is I put it in red on purpose, but it says this leads to a saturated and hyper-mediated environment for young people, similar to the Matrix, a world of sort of unreality, where things are placed on top of the reality. The famous quote of Lawrence Fishburne, "Welcome to the desert of the real," that you're not who you are on Second Life. That's not who you really are. Probably who you are, present yourself out on a date site is not who you are. With the constructed reality that you present on Facebook is not who you are. Maybe all these things together are a culmination of who you are. But what the internet allows is for you to create a false reality and to live in a false world, or at least something that's not as real as the real world. Although some people would argue, hey, look, these relationships I have online exist outside of the online world, therefore they're real. This just enhances the relationships. It just makes it easier. But I would say that certainly the concept of a friend, what that word means, has been altered severely. Most people don't have 3,000 friends. I'd be happy to have 4 close friends, frankly. When I go back to Ohio, I will. So anyway, high school friends that I've had. But in general, you know, if you want to get into the sociology of friendship, you have people that are sort of ornamental friends, which is what I would call most of your Facebook friends. These are like bracelets and necklaces and makeup that you put on your face and costumes. These are not friends that you take seriously. This is just a way of like going, look how popular I am. Like people, when cell phones first could do texting and stuff like that, the big thing to show you were like some kind of a popular big shot was to get phone calls every 5 minutes. And some people would actually program their phone to call themselves or to text themselves to make it look like they actually had. I'm not kidding you. Okay. Anyway, or people. I don't think people would do this, but I wouldn't be shocked if people make fake Facebook pages so they could friend themselves or something. It's sort of like a tip jar. If you don't put any money in the tip jar, no one else is going to put any money in it either. You know, so, but again, and then there's acquaintances, which I would say that most of your Facebook people that are friended you, that's probably who they are. And then there are probably close friends where Facebook does actually help you keep in touch with them. And maybe you're going to schools in different states. This is a great way to keep in touch, whereas before, even in the late 80s, it was long-distance phone calls, and it was an ordeal. And people didn't have cell phones, so if they weren't home, it was an answering machine tag game that went back and forth. Even with email is somewhat very impersonal. And Facebook does video chatting and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, and as far as somebody who I'm concerned want to start distance education, I couldn't be happier that there's this. I mean, we can have students from Hong Kong sitting on a screen here, and not only could they see me and hear me, but you can hear them and see them. They can show you what the weather's like. They can take the camera outside and show you the streets of Hong Kong. Fascinating. Which is something I want to do, actually. Anyway, to update this information from the Kaiser Family Foundation study, and I urge you to read this, okay? So updating this information, the Kaiser Family Foundation updated the study that was used by Ula Fair in Trends in Media Use that was published in 2004. And the results show that young people in 2009 are using more media for longer each day. And I guarantee you these numbers have already gone up. This was released in 2010. The research was done in 2009. That's plenty enough time, even though we're only, thank God it's in March too, 3 months into, almost March, 3 months into 2012, that things have even changed past that. So here's the results. They released it in D.C. They're a bit of a think tank, and they do lobbying for the government as well, or with the government, not for the government anyway. With technology allowing nearly 24-hour media access as children and teens go about their daily lives, the amount of time young people spend with entertainment media has risen dramatically, especially among minority youth, according to a study released, and I didn't put that detail in here, but if you're interested, you can look at that. According to a study released today by the Kaiser Family Foundation, today 8 to 18-year-olds devote an average of 7 hours and 38 minutes to using entertainment media across a typical day, more than 53 hours a week. That's if you were at a job, you could be getting paid 13 hours overtime for this. And the beautiful thing is, you're not getting paid for this. Most of the time, you're paying for this. Okay. Now, as far as this minority comment that they make, one of the things that Ula Fair in the article found was that African Americans in particular watched more television and played more video games when they were younger. This may have to do with the fact that, it was a significant amount, but not as much. I would like to have seen them broke that down instead of race into family structure. Were these from divorced family households? Or is there some other cultural reality, or also break it down by gender? Because I'm not totally convinced that what this is really picking up is Hispanics and African Americans in this country have a higher rate of poverty. Therefore, their parents are more likely to either both of them to work or have a single family household where the mother is constantly at work, and many of them might be latchkey kids. There are plenty of people in white suburbs like this, but less so, percentage-wise. I'd be curious to see that, because one of the interesting things that comes out is that Latin American youth don't have this. They're either at the same level as white Americans or lower. That may have to do more with the fact that they live in many Hispanics, especially Latino people who have come here, like they're the first generation born here. They still live in much more extended families than do white families, or even African American families, or even Asian families in this country. Although Asian families do it as well. So anyway, so that might have to do with the fact you have a more extended family, you have less time to watch television, or more people watching you while you're watching television or watching out for you. And because young people spend so much of that time media multitasking, using more than one medium at a time, they actually manage to pack a total of 10 hours and 45 minutes worth of media content into those 7.5 hours. The amount of time spent with media increased by 1 hour and 17 minutes a day over the past 5 years. From 6 hours to 21 minutes in 2004, that was the first study I talked about, to 7 hours and 38 minutes today. And because of media multitasking, the total amount of media content consumed during that period has increased, this is just one day, from 8 hours and 33 minutes in 2004 to 10 hours and 45 minutes today. Meaning that if you take the fact that, okay, while I was watching TV for 4 hours, I was listening to music for 2 hours, and that's 6 hours, even though it still took place in that 4-hour time. So that's what they're talking about. They didn't spend 10.5 hours total, like a extended time, like from 10 o'clock in the morning till 8 or something. That's not what happened. They were just watching, or engaging in media behavior for 7.5 hours, but if you combine all the stuff where they were doing multiple media tasks at once, it comes out to this 10 hours and 45 minutes a day. That is well beyond what an average workday would be. That's almost the entire, that's more than half the waking day. Most people are up about 16, 17 hours a day. Stockbrokers are up 20 hours a day. That's why they look like they're 90 when they're 28. So anyway, I'm sorry. You can go to a stockbroker like brokerage firm. If they have a birthday party, some guy who looks 55 is like, yeah, it's my 27th birthday. I'm like, man, you need to slow down, dude. Like, yeah, there's a bottle of whiskey in the middle of the cake. Anyway, maybe some pills. He's probably spelled his name and Vicodin. Anyway, the increase in media. So one of the things that's driving this increase in media use is mobile media. The increase in Apple's got its fingers all over this, there's no doubt about it, and then so does Android and the Kindle. The increase in media use is driven in large part by ready access to mobile devices like cell phones and iPods over the past, and iPhones and iPads. Everything's got an I in front of it. Over the past 5 years, there's been a huge increase in ownership among 8 to 18-year-olds from 39% to 66% for cell phones. And I've seen that number as high as 84%, 85%. And I'll bet the only thing that keeps this from going to 100, can anybody tell me why? Maybe two main reasons. One of them is parental disapproval, right? What's the other one?
People can't afford them.
Right, money. Maybe the schools, but that's not. But that doesn't keep them from having one, right? That just keeps them from using it in class. But certainly, and I'm surprised that Apple hasn't tried to tap this like subprime market or whatever you want to call it, like the lower end of the market, and come up with the you know. I mean, they sort of do that because the iPhone 1, I assure you, you can go get these things somewhere, right? I mean, I would guess you could go on eBay and get an iPhone 1 that nobody wants. But the thing is, Apple pulled them in, right? When you went to go get a new one, they give you a rebate on the old one or something like that. So, and some, if you sign up for certain plans, well, don't they give you the iPhone for like $90 or $100 or something? So, anyway, and then they go, oh, by the way, your data is not unlimited or something. Anyway, 5 cents for every terabyte, or $5,000, whatever it is. Anyway, so this number is probably even higher now. And from 18, look at this. This will tell you why Apple stock went up to $500. From 18% to 76% for iPods and other MP3 players. So there's where the jump has really taken place. During this period, cell phones and iPods have become true multimedia devices. In fact, young people now spend more time listening to music, playing games, and watching TV on their cell phones, total 49 minutes daily, and that's just an average. Then they spend talking on them, which is 33 minutes a day, and this is probably going down with every second. Anyway, now, on top of this, on top of what the report was doing, just looking at media use and multimedia tasking, is they looked at what is the potential impact of parental involvement in media use and choices. So back to some of the issues we were talking about in the time-bind book, and in general the section on family, is the idea that parents have an enormous role to play in guiding the behavior of young people, particularly when it comes to media. Wait till I show you some of the data that shows what happens to young people when they're exposed to adult material when they're too young. It's not a good picture. Early viewing of R-rated movies has been connected to sexual activity. It's been connected to drug use, alcohol use, smoking cigarettes, committing crimes, all kinds of things. It's quite interesting. But it's a much more difficult and complex relationship than just somebody watching a movie about a bank robbery and going out and thinking they're going to do this, or watching like Blow and going out and doing coke, or watching Half-Baked or something like that. But certainly Half-Baked's probably more likely to have a positive impact on people's opinion of marijuana than Blow is of cocaine, because at the end, if you've seen that movie, it doesn't turn out well for this guy. Same with Scarface. I mean, people can put the poster of that guy on his wall all you want, but the fact is he was a drug addict who lost his wife and killed a bunch of his friends and family, and then in the end got his chest blown out. So, how old was he? Like 30-something in the movie? So, anyway, but that's the American dream, right? For some people. Yes. Go ask, not the real Rick Ross, but Free Reign Rick Ross, who's actually in jail right now, who actually started the crack cocaine business in LA. Anyway, or at least helped to start it. But as far as parents and media rules, first of all, only about 3 in 10, so about 30% of young people say they have any rules about time they can spend on watching TV or playing video games, and 36% say the same thing about using the computer. When parents do set limits, children spend less time with media. Those with any media rules at all, even if it's just, I don't want you watching TV until your homework is done, consume nearly 3 hours less media per day than those with no rules. That is a big deal. That is what we call statistically significant. It's not 20 minutes less a day. It's 3 hours. That's not some little thing. And people say, big deal, kids are watching TV for 7.5 hours a day. I don't think you'd say it was a big deal if they were doing drugs for 7.5 hours a day. Or conversely, were reading books and doing schoolwork for 7.5 hours a day. Or doing charity work. Or, you know, engaging in graffiti or something like that. We would not look at something where kids spend 7.5 hours a day as insignificant, would you? And here's the other thing. If you remember from the intersections reader, and some of you got it out, how much time did parents spend with their kids per day, roughly? And it differed based on the gender of the parent, but roughly how much time did parents spend with their kids? I think it was like 2.5 at the most, and that was mothers. This is nearly 3 times that amount. And what's interesting is if you actually look at the intersection reader, it said that parents spend more time with their kids now than they did in 1950. But kids didn't spend time watching television as much as they used to, although that was certainly a big thing. Okay? And I'll tell you right now, you think there's nothing on TV to watch now? You go back to the 1950s. There was 3, maybe 4 channels in PBS, depending on what you looked at. And if something was, if all the channels had something crappy on, you were stuck. Right? I mean, you might as well listen to the radio at that point. It was just terrible. So anyway, I think this is a very good indicator, at least that parental involvement does have a major impact. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that this lack of media exposure is necessarily causing a bad or positive thing to happen. However, the study goes on and talks more specifically about heavy media use and grades. And while they're not saying that these things are directly connected, meaning a cause and effect relationship, they are at least showing in the statistics that 47% of heavy media users, and heavy media users means that these people use more than 16 hours of media a day. I don't know what these people do for a living or something. I guess they're kids, so they don't have a job. But still, that's whacked out. I mean, there's no other way to look at it. I mean, that is just out of proportion to anything that normal behavior would be. I mean, this is somebody who probably has obsessive-compulsive disorder or something. Or has an addiction to the media. I mean, this is the crackberry people. This is the people who get thumb cramps and stuff, you know, from doing this stuff. Reminds me of an episode of The Office where Ryan actually became the boss, and he tried to modernize the workplace, and he gave everybody a BlackBerry, and Michael would just pretend how to use it and stuff. He put everything in there, and he still used his Rolodex. Anyway, 47% of heavy media users say they get fair or poor grades. That's C or below, while 23% of light users say they get bad grades. I would suggest that there's something else going on here. This is a much more complex relationship. Because still, people who are using, and light media is less than 3 hours a day, still 23%, maybe this is more of a statement about public education in this country than it is about the media, that 23% of light media users are still getting bad grades. And some people would say, look, 3 hours of media use is not light. Okay? Try running for 3 hours. You know? Try like pounding nails into a board for 3 hours. 3 hours is a long time. Okay? And think about how big of a hole you could dig in 3 hours. And think about what you could do in 3 hours. Okay? I mean, you could see a movie and almost see the rest of another one. You could see 2 movies. Okay? If there were no previews for a half hour. And a stupid cartoon that's a big commercial for Pixar toys or something like that. Have you seen the cartoon where the action figures are all like in some kind of an AA meeting or something? What the hell is that supposed to? I mean, it's for kids. And what are they? I guess they're getting them ready for being alcoholics or something later on in their life. That just shows you on some levels that Hollywood writers have a different perspective on life. That for people in Hollywood, going to a therapist or AA is just something you do eventually. And for most other people, that's the last thing they want to do. You know, and they don't want to get in a situation where they feel they have to do that. Okay, interventions are like every other minute in Hollywood, you know. I mean, look at Whitney. If somebody could have just, they'd have had to strap her down. They'd have had to put her into an institute where she couldn't have got out, because it seemed like every time she said she stopped, they'd come back again. With Heath Ledger, I think it was just youth and stupidity. And again, one thing that comes out of Heath Ledger's life is don't hang around with the Olsen twins. Okay? I mean, they look like vampires, and it makes you think they're not. How come they're not in those Twilight movies? It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? They don't even need makeup. Neither does Macaulay Culkin. He can put him in there too. All right, so the conflict view, and I'm going to show you this here in a minute. Remember, we had this theoretical perspective, and one of the strongest ones that we have here is conflict theorists, because a lot of the evidence points that there are large groups in society, powerful groups in society, power elite, whether it's politics, whether it's economics, whether it's military, or whether it's media, which are connected to corporations that control society, make big decisions. You didn't get to decide the 1996 Telecommunications Act. You didn't get to decide how much cable prices would be, or any of this stuff, or who gets to develop HD television, or whether or not you wear sunglasses while you're watching. And that's the other thing. These glasses are mostly all dark. In the middle of the day, while you're sitting inside trying to look at Dan Deerdorf and how many wrinkles you can count on his face. In all defense to Dan Deerdorf, he was a football player. He never claimed to be a beauty king or something. But like for someone like him, HD television is the worst thing that was ever invented. And Phil Simms ain't exactly a looker either. If you've seen him lately too. I mean, my gosh. Some ugly things come up. And in general, so we don't decide these processes. We don't decide who gets to own these companies. We don't get to decide what the content is other than our viewership. Okay? You didn't get to decide whether or not they kicked Charlie Sheen off of 2.5 Men. Okay?
It's terrible enough.
Ashton Kutcher's just not that funny. I mean, without that cast on that 70s show, and name something he's done that was outrageously funny since that 70s show. Besides hanging out with Demi Moore and making a complete mockery of. I know this is hard, and I know some people still believe in marriage in this country and society, and what people like Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher do, to some people, is kind of. I didn't think that much. I don't really care what these people do with their own lives. Common law wives and husbands are pretty common. Most people do it because they can't afford to get married. I don't think that was the case with those two. I think they just didn't want to get. And I can understand that too. Do you really want to get divorced? Anyway, that's why I watched The Big Bang Theory. That's a much funnier show. Besides, Kaylee Cuoco is way better looking than anything on 2.5 Men. I mean, my God. Anyway, so conflict theorist view is that the media. I hope that gets on YouTube. Maybe she'll call me. I doubt it. I doubt it. Anyway. As the attractive, symbolic, and persuasive arm, maybe CBS will just give me some money, of other elite institutions like corporations, the idea here is that, and I will show you this, for example, CNBC, which is a business news network, they're supposed to be looking out for you and your money. It seems more likely that the things they do, or at least conflict theorists would suggest, they cheerlead for companies. They want Apple stock to go up. So they put positive stories out about Apple instead of stories about how they abused workers in China. Or Walmart. They ignore their behavior and just present their profits. Or they support the bailout without any real debate. Or whatever it is. Sometimes even media outlets will give certain political candidates favorable treatment over others. That's certainly something that Ross Perot complained about when he ran as an independent third-party candidate in 1992 and in 1996. And Ralph Nader said it as well. Government as well. The media is used by the government. We'll talk about this. How come nobody questioned the evidence that led us into the Iraq War until after the Iraq War? I think it's a little too late to be saying that we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. I would say to the American people this, and to you in the class, if they really thought that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction like smallpox or chemical weapons, do you really think they would have sent 220,000 Americans' children, essentially, and people's husbands and wives and uncles and stuff into an absolute disaster where 250,000 American soldiers would have been vaporized by some chemical attack or a nuclear attack? Do you really think that if they thought the Iraqi government had that capability, they would have attacked that country the way they did? I don't think so. And that's the excuse the Bush administration gives. Well, we thought they did, and the Clinton administration thought they did, and on and on. I'm telling you, Saddam would have used those things. There's just no doubt in my mind. Because eventually, where did he end up? He got his head pulled off by a piece of rope. So it was either use nuclear weapons or die for him. And I think if he had them, he would have used them. And I'll tell you right now, you can bet that's the reason why we haven't attacked North Korea. You can bet that's the reason. You can bet that's the reason why we're not going to attack Iran or Pakistan. For all we know, like one of the things that's been accused is that 9/11 there was a cover-up. And same with the JFK assassination, right? One set of group alleges that Pakistan was behind the 9/11 attacks. And because Pakistan has nuclear weapons, and we're supposed to be one of their allies, and we didn't want to start a larger South Asian war, we blamed it on these terrorist groups in Afghanistan. Which, by the way, I hope you know that there seems to be evidence that some of these hijackers were trained at U.S. Army bases, as well as bin Laden got training for about 10 to 15 years from the U.S. government. It smacks like the Lee Harvey Oswald thing, where he was working on both sides of the Cuban issue. He was supporting and attacking them. He defected to Russia, married a Soviet citizen, and then brought her back without one question being asked. Like, what were you doing in the Soviet? And this was the 50s. I don't think you can just go over to the Soviet Union, defect, lose your citizenship, marry a Russian woman, and go, you know what? I'd like to come back now and be a capitalist again. And can I bring my communist wife with me too, who, by the way, is not a spy, but she might be. I don't know. You know, I mean, anybody who sleep with Lee Harvey Oswald's got to have an ulterior motive anyway. It's like Billy Bob Thornton. You go ahead and you sleep with him, Angelina. Okay? Anyway, somebody told me that they used to keep a vial of each other's blood around their Brad, run! Run! He's probably just as kooky as she is. I would love to set up, that needs to be a reality show, doesn't it? For Angelina, don't you think that would be the biggest hit? Because some people would watch it because they like them, and I would watch it just to see the freak show. It'd be like being Bobby Brown or something like that. It was a real class act. By the way, you know he's touring with, what was it, New Edition? Remember that one song they had, Cool It Now? You remember the song? Anyway, and then also the military. There's a new movie out, Act of Valor. Anybody seen this? It's about Navy. It's done with real Navy SEALs. But I'll tell you right now, even though it shows dirty parts of war, I doubt it makes the military look bad. It probably makes them look honorable and brave, and it's dangerous, and we're here protecting your liberties. Okay? Or we're protecting the Kuwaiti oil fields. Anyway, that's liberty, oil, isn't it? Anyway, again, so these groups and institutions use the media to indoctrinate the masses into capitalism. Television is run by advertisements. Okay, the Super Bowl wouldn't exist without all the ads. It just wouldn't. Sports wouldn't exist. Think about it. Think about, because they delayed the race till 7 p.m. so I can watch it. Think about, and the cars would look great without this junk on it, wouldn't they? Could put flames on the side. Daytona, have you ever seen a Daytona car or a NASCAR Sprint Cup cars, what they're called? Cup car. They're big moving billboards. And you'd think that something moving at 220 miles an hour would be too difficult to see, but the cameras are very good at, like, you know, staying with the car, and they zoom in, and they'll even talk about, and the drivers are hilarious. You know, Carl Edwards will get out of his car and say, oh yeah, I'd like to thank the Geico, Aflac, Scott Turf Builders, Home Depot, Ford Fusion. And then if you guys watch the race tonight, you'll see this. Some of them are tied in with drinks, like Nas or Red Bull or Diet Coke or Coke Zero. And when right before they're about ready to interview them, they'll have the thing in their hand and they'll take a drink. Yeah. And they get paid every single time they take a drink. Or whether it's Gatorade or whatever. It's hilarious. It is just hilarious. It is the most consumer It's prostitution. It is just straight out selling yourself out there. They got crap. If you've ever seen their jumpsuits, there's crap all over them, all the way down them. And you just don't, in football you don't see that. You see a little Nike symbol, maybe Riddle or whatever on the back of the helmet. You see some advertisements around the stadium, but in general you don't see. And worst of all, NASCAR used to be called the Winston Cup. And its #1 sponsor used to be a tobacco company. So a particular brand of Winston's. So anyway, and to show you the power of the media, my stepdad loved NASCAR and he smoked Winston's. I doubt those two things are unrelated. Anyway. Distract the consumer behavior as well, teaching people about, you should want this object, you should want a cell phone, you should want an iPhone. Also distract the masses. This is something that Noam Chomsky said with sports and entertainment. To reduce conflict in general in a society, you get people cheering for something that is not real, or seems not to be real. Like the New York Giants. You say, oh, it's a real team and all that stuff. Other than the small amount of emotional excitement that people get, in general, when the New York Giants win the Super Bowl, it doesn't make the unemployment rate go down. It doesn't solve the national debt. It doesn't stop the fact that there's homeless people in New York. It doesn't stop the class differences that are going on in the United States. It doesn't help racial things. So, and again, it's hard for me to be an advocate for the other side of this because I love sports so much, but I can see it. I understand how it distracts people, where important things are coming up, and instead of, for example, if you are a devout baseball fan, and if you're a Mets fan, I feel for you. So you're going to learn what money's all about. You already know because Bernie Madoff's creditors are going to sue your team for about $500 million, and they already had issues anyway. It reminded me of the Washington Redskins. Spend a lot of money, get absolutely nothing out of it. Anyway, but if you watch baseball, there's 162 games. People who are real baseball fans will watch spring training games. They'll watch batting practice. They'll watch interviews. They'll read stuff on ESPN. They'll do fantasy baseball. It becomes a full-time job. What's going on when you're doing that? Or what are you not doing? You're not paying attention to the local school board election. You're not paying attention to any corruption or crime in your neighborhood. You're not paying attention to national issues. All this stuff. Maybe you're not paying attention to your kids. Right? And this is a dangerous distraction. Other people, on the other hand, say, hey, look, this is also, the other side of that is this idea of the safety valve institution. That, you know what? I come home from work, the only thing I got to help me relax is watching either the Mets win or the Yankees lose or whatever it is, or reversing. Okay? I actually kind of like both. And sorry, Yankee fans, but I like to see them get into the playoffs and then get murdered. That just makes me laugh. Especially when they win 105 games, and then Seattle smacks them in the face. Or the Angels. The Angels have been really the real thorn in the side, haven't they, for a while? Anyway. But I like it when they win, too, because I like to hear people talk and all this other stuff. I wish you could have another Subway series, but that's not going to happen for another century. Anyway. But again, and entertainment, too. The Oscars last night. How important really was that? Right? I mean, it's good to see Meryl Streep, and I only saw the results because I saw them in the newspaper. It's good to see Meryl Streep win one, and I love it because she won it for playing Margaret Thatcher. Anyway, and then this movie that is essentially a silent movie won, The Artist. And a lot of people thought The Help should have won. Was Moneyball actually nominated for Best Picture?
Yeah.
You got to be kidding me! They lost to the Yankees in the playoffs that year, didn't they? Is that what happened? They didn't win the World Series. And their team's not exactly lighting the scoreboard up right now. And I'll tell you right now, there's no way Billy Beane looks like Brad Pitt. Not a chance. And why is he always shoving food in his mouth during his movies? He did that in Ocean's 11. He was jamming food in his mouth. And he was jamming food in his mouth in this movie too. And I doubt Billy Beane was jamming entire Twinkies in his mouth. I don't know what is a quirk with Brad or something. Anyway. But again, that people aren't paying attention to the democratic electoral process. Maybe you're neglecting your family, all this other stuff. Marx would have been most concerned with the commercial nature of the media and how it teaches people to accept the worst aspects of capitalism. Like the bank bailout, fools people into thinking that they need to buy more and more things from the store to be happy. So implicated in causing materialism. He would also be alarmed at the lack of class dialogue. Sorry, that's my landlady. I had it on earlier because I was talking. Sorry. Anyway, Mills, on the other hand, would look at the media and the Big Six as an arm of the corporate government and military cabal that used messages and images of the media to justify their actions, particularly military actions, and make people into good, docile citizens, not question the system. What I want to show you, though, and again, here's some quotes from Bagdikian and Chomsky. We'll get to that in a little bit later. I want to show you, though, this chart that I had listed to just show you one of the companies and what they do. So here's Disney. And even though it says GE has a higher revenue, even though it has a higher revenue, GE does, they generate a lot of that revenue from non-media types of things. So for the Walt Disney Company, they make $36 billion a year just for media alone. And they own a lot of different things. So let me just show you their media stuff, and then we'll continue with the rest of the theoretical perspectives on Wednesday. And make sure you read that article on children and altruism. So just looking at the TV, you can see, and one of the arguments is here by conflict theorists is that there are only a few companies that control the media, and in that reality, it restricts things completely. That only certain types of information get out, and it also leads to this dealing in sex and violence that occurs here, or at least an exploitation. So one of the things, Disney's been accused of exploiting children and other stuff as well. But again, what you see here is how broad their interest and their ownership of channels are. They go from things like ESPN to the classic Disney Channel to things like the History Channel, A&E Network, the Biography Channel, the Military History Channel. Disney owns the Military History Channel. They own movie production companies. They own Hollywood Pictures. Again, if you watch ESPN, you're watching ABC, Disney ABC. Again, they own ABC. And you say, well, Disney focuses mostly on children's content. One of the most popular shows on ABC is Desperate Housewives. So they attack the entire spectrum of age, from birth all the way up into your 50s and 60s. Yeah.
Speaking of Disney, Apple is one of the major shareholders in Disney.
That makes perfect sense. And they'll probably get together and do some kind of thing where you can get Disney content. You probably already do it now. Exclusive content, or maybe watch Disney Channel. On my phone, I can watch Disney. So, and it's Sprint, and I would assume Sprint's got a relationship with them too. There's the other point, and we're going to get to that a little bit more. It's not just the fact. It's not just the fact that Disney owns these things. It's very astutely, you notice that they have relationships with these other companies. CNN, for example, has relationships. Apple advertises on their network. Do you think CNN is going to do a hard-hitting investigative report that makes Apple look terrible? They're less likely. They still might do it, but they're less likely. All right, any questions? All right, everybody, I'll see you on Wednesday. But he does, in the section entitled Rays of Light, suggests this on page 133. Within the gloom there is some light. When the first edition of this book was published, it warned each generation has to publish its own priorities and to reinvigorate the best principles of the society. That new generation, now joined with veteran allies in the struggle for freedom of significant information, has